What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit that like button and let me know what you think of today's very interesting interview in the comment section below. If you're listening to us currently on iTunes or Spotify, welcome in. Please hit the like button and make sure you leave us a detailed review. If you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet, or living under a rock and seeing this video or podcast for the first time, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another sit down video. What's up, everybody? Welcome in. This is episode 187 of the Sit Down, and I'm your host, Jeff Nadu. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. We've got another great show planned for you today, as always. And one thing that I've talked about at times on here, in fact, we talk about it weekly, is the many rackets the mafia has and have had in New York for a long period of time. One of the more interesting and lucrative rackets that we still see today involving the mafia, whether it's extortion or even owning them, is strip clubs. They're a seedy underbelly, dens of iniquity, if we want to call them that. But they're places that mobsters can make a bunch of money from if they do it the right way. One of the most interesting stories that I've heard involving strip clubs and the Gambino crime family and Genovese crime families is their attempted and successful takeover of Scores, which at one point was one of the most popular gentlemen's clubs in New York City. In fact, it was so popular that at the height of Howard Stern would mention Scores regularly on his show. Now, I've delved into this topic over the years. I've done a show you can see here on a person called Michael Bluetrek, who essentially owned Scores. Today, we're going to talk to another person that was involved in Scores on a day-to-day basis. I guess we could call him an associate of the mafia, most notably the Gambino crime family. His name is Craig Carlino. Craig, you have an interesting story. We're going to talk to you for the first time and start at the top. First of all, how you doing? You have a fascinating story that your life became.
I'm fine. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no
hopefully I
problem.
can give you some insight into how Scores was created and operated.
Yeah, it's such an interesting place because strip clubs, as I mentioned, and I don't think you would find any disrespect in this, they are kind of dens of iniquity, right? I mean, they're a place where people go to get their rocks off, essentially. You've got people that go to them that, you know, maybe are missing something. There's drug use in them. There's also a lot of parties happen there and fun happens there too. They're just kind of fun, wild places.
When I created Scores, there were no private rooms in those days. So
really?
There was no prostitution in the club because there was nowhere to do it.
Yeah.
So the idea was to make it the next step. There was Studio 54, and then there was Scores in the 90s.
Right.
That was the whole objective behind operating.
Oh, interesting. So you saw kind of what people like Steve Rubel did, and you said, okay, I want to take this to a strip club.
Scores was the first club to get mainstream media in it, and that was the objective.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and it worked. And I think the problem, though, is, as you know, and I think this is one of the things about the mob that I've always found so interesting because I'm not connected to the mob. We know that. I'm just a guy that is interested in this stuff. And I always looked at like my own father, Craig, like he had a business. And I always thought about, wow, you know, I would love to have seen one of these guys come out and try to bully my dad, you know, living where we do. But I think to myself, that's easy to say when I live in rural Pennsylvania. It's a different story when you're in the belly of the beast. And I really want to kind of get into kind of the vultures that these people were to people like you, where you were essentially trying to run a business. And you've mentioned, I've read in some of the stuff that you've put out that you couldn't do business. And that's the power the mob had. It didn't matter if you were a construction company, a strip club, a restaurant, you had to deal with these people. And I want to talk more about that. But I want to start at the beginning with you because this is our first time speaking to you. You're from Long Island originally, right?
Right.
Tell me about your childhood. I know your mother was Jewish. You had an Italian father. And I found it funny in some of the stuff that you've put out. You talk about the fact that your name was Craig, which is not an Italian name, but your mother didn't want that stigma to come to you.
I think I broke a line of Joes going back to the Roman Empire, literally. where my father was from downtown New York City, Mulberry Street, and my grandfather was definitely a mob guy. He kept my father out of it, which I write about in this book I'm doing. And my mother did not want me raised on Mulberry Street, basically in Little Italy. And she just gave me the least Italian name. She thought it had a nice ring to it, Craig Carlino. And she wasn't going for that Joey or Sonny or Joey Onions or Pepe
Vinny,
or all that kind of stuff.
What's smart by her. You know, I actually read something that you wrote in your book that you're doing that, and I have to ask you about this down the road. Your mother was actually the house mother in the strip club. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's pretty unbelievable. Usually mothers don't want to be a part of stuff like that, but your mom seems like she I guess you kind of have to be motherly, right? You have to like relate to the girls and kind of take care of them in a way. So,
well, it started when I was working in the clubs in Florida for somebody else, and I opened Pure Platinum, and the club was just opening, and I didn't really know the business. They just hired me cold because they liked me. I sold a pizza place and went into a strip club and asked for a job because I thought it was cool. I saw the money flying around, and of course I saw the beautiful girls. And we were younger, and at that time I was the only son on the planet paying alimony. So I said, "Mom, you need a job." And she was a model, excuse me, for a lot of the cosmetic companies back in the day. She worked at Bloomingdale's, Bergdorf's, Macy's, so she knew about makeup and fashion and all those kinds of things. And gave her a shot. And the house mom basically is the liaison between the management and the girls. Take attendance, fix their makeup, their hair, sell. My mother had everything, G-strings, you name it, she sold it back there.
Well, I remember I saw an interview one time with that guy, Dennis Hoff, who ran the Bunny Ranch out in Nevada. And he had talked about, he had a woman that worked for him for years that was essentially the most important person to the operation, right? And I know like even Donald Trump has that woman, that Susan woman that like, I think kind of makes sure everything's good. Like you always need that woman to kind of handle the books or handle the girls or whatever. So it makes sense. I got to ask, because you kind of describe, interestingly enough, in a weird way, you saw the money just like a young mob guy sees the money, right? And you say, well, I'm working in this restaurant or I'm doing stuff that maybe I'm not really wanting to do. I want to go get something bigger. In your younger years, you worked at a restaurant, right?
My father used to put up money and lend money to guys and build pizzerias and delis all over New York City. So I started doing that as a teenager. I would buy and sell pizza places, little ones. And by the time I was 22, 23 years old, I had accumulated around 300 grand. And I thought that was a fortune then. So I decided to go to Fort Lauderdale and open a store there because the sunshine, the girls, it was the mid 80s. Fort Lauderdale was a happening spot. And I opened a pizza place, built it brand new. And it was doing okay. You know, everybody was coming in to eat and hang out. And then I walked into this solid gold strip club and I said, oh my God, because New York didn't have anything like that. So the girls all like looked like Barbie dolls and smelled like suntan lotion. And I'm like, whoa. And then I bought a beer for $4.50, which was a lot of money then. And I was selling like stuffed shells and lasagna with garlic bread and salad for $4.50. Plus I was being around, you know, all my ugly relatives. I go, man, I want to be around these beautiful girls and maybe make some money.
So you envisioned, you kind of, seems like you had kind of a brain of like a businessman, an entrepreneur. You saw the vision of, hey, I can move dinner and pizza my whole life, but there's way more markup in a beer. And again, who doesn't want to be around beautiful people, right? I get it. So you envisioned that at a young age and said, I'm going to try to bring it somewhere else. I guess so you work at this strip club in Florida, right?
Right.
What kind of things are you doing on a daily basis? Are you just kind of managing it? Are you just kind of, transporting the girls to make sure they get home correctly? You're working with security?
No, so the guy I worked for, Michael Peter, kind of invented, we're still friends too, as he kind of invented the high-end strip club throughout the country. So the managers all had to be in tuxedos, name tags. It was run like a high-end hotel. I had a background in hospitality. I'm a trained chef. I trained in Italy. My family still owns a restaurant in Sicily where I trained in New York. So I trained with the deli guys in New York, and I was a high-end chef. So I had a lot of, coming from New York, being around all those, everyone was always older than me, working in my dad's places. So I had a lot of polish. And I just went in and applied for a job as a manager. And I went in a suit and tie and, you know, kind of got Gotti'd up, for lack of a better word, and had the nails polished in those days. And they just liked me. The HR guy just liked the way I spoke. He pulled out a cigarette to light. I lit it for him. I had a gold cigarette lighter. I was definitely 80s out. There's no doubt.
I will say, Craig, I don't know you too well. You know, I'm only speaking to you for the first time, at least on camera. And I feel like if you look up strip club manager, you would be right there as like the definition of what that would look like. You kind of have like the, you know, the hair, the glasses. You like you would wear a suit well. You got like the gold bracelet on. You're from New York. Like you kind of envision what I think most people think of as, and I don't mean any disrespect here. If I went to someone in Dubuque, Iowa and said, hey, what does kind of a fringe mob guy strip club owner look like? They would point to you.
What's funny is when I went to work for Michael, everyone was from the South.
Right.
Those clubs were in Orlando and South Florida and South Carolina. I mean, when someone said to me, how y'all doing? I said, y'all, I hurt my mouth. Actually, people got a kick out of me because, believe it or not, my New York accent was worse then. I almost needed a translator to speak. So everybody kind of liked me and got a kick out of me. And then you learn the program of how he operated. And the beauty was very important, the service, the hospitality. And I already had a pretty good background, but I still had to learn the business, the basics of the way he ran the business. And I did. I basically did.
You know, it's interesting because I'm a history guy and I never really realized this, but I looked into strip clubs from a history standpoint. Strip clubs, as far as women enticing men by taking their clothes off, has history of like 400 years. That's been going on. And you don't really think about it. And I know like the strip club, I know back in like the 10s and 20s, there were brothels, which is a major difference from a strip club. A brothel, though, in a way, was kind of like the strip club where you get the attention of men. And instead of taking your clothes off, you just go up in a room and you have sex with them. Do we know kind of, I guess the South is where they originated? Is Florida a good assumption?
Well, originally the clubs, they had strip clubs in rural towns were run by bikers back in those days.
Yes, sure.
All the bikers ran them. I wasn't around for that. And then when Michael Peters started opening clubs in South Florida, he was successful, man. And this guy used to pull up in a Rolls Royce and he had a yacht and he had all these gorgeous girls with him. And you know, being an Italian guy or half Italian guy from New York, and I went to Fort Lauderdale for the girls anyway. I'm like, my God, this guy's got it going on, you know? So, you know, I just went to work for him and kind of learned what to do and what not to do. Because I changed when I took over Scores. I left him. I left the Florida clubs and went to run some regular nightclubs. I was always leaving over money. Guys, I was pretty good at it, managing stuff. So guys offered me more money, so I would leave. And when I was in New York City, one of their executives called me, and they were taking over the old El Morocco in 1991, which was a very famous club. It's been in a bunch of Woody Allen movies. You see the zebra skin booths in the background, and from the 50s and 60s had that live band when people actually got dressed up and went out and all that stuff. And they turned it into a strip club. So they asked me to be the GM and opened it and set up a restaurant on the 3rd floor in the club. And the club wasn't going well, and they owed me a lot of money, and they weren't paying me. And not so much Michael Peter, but he would do licensing deals with these club owners to put the name. He had 3 brands: Pure Platinum, Solid Gold, and the Dollhouse. He had done a Pure Platinum at the old nightclub Stringfellows in New York, which was popular. Then he did another one. So they called me back when I was in New York. I was owning a restaurant in Long Island. I sold it, went back into the city to work for them. And because they owed me money, weren't paying me. It didn't end well, that club. And I went and made a deal at Scores. They were actually looking at it. They wanted to do. Scores was open at the time and in bankruptcy, in very bad shape.
So obviously I've done a video on Michael Bluetrek, who, you know, I'm not going to go into Blue Trick and his past. I've already done that. But Blue Trick, if I'm correct, is the original owner of Scores. Is that correct?
Well, he was one of the original guys that opened Scores.
Right.
And it was a massive failure.
Right.
They did not know the business. He had legal problems, so he had to put the club in someone else's name.
And we have to also realize Michael Bluetrek, for all due respect, has always been a scammer. Okay. He, was involved in stock stuff many years ago. Michael Bluetrek is also a pedophile, as far as we know.
Right. Oh, I knew that.
Yeah, he's a bad
convicted pedophile. So the club wasn't in his name. It wasn't his friend's name. And they had a bunch of investors and they needed management.
Okay.
They were failing. They saw the success of the Stringfellows Pure Platinum Club. That was Michael Peter, the guy from Florida.
So they kind of lured you over.
Sorry?
They lured you over to kind of run.
No, I swiped it out from under the guys I was working for. They owed me money, didn't want to pay me. I tried to work it out. They couldn't. And we set up a meeting. I went there and first thing I did was meet a guy named John Saliano who was the manager then, but now he's Goomba Johnny. He's a touring comedian.
I've seen that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. He was connected. And he said to me, he was running the place. He says, you know what, Craig, we don't know what we're doing. We just don't. And then I met with the owners and kind of said, look, don't pay me till we do $100,000 a week, which was a lot of business back then. They were doing like 20. It was just a massive mess. They knew nothing about the business. I had to remodel.
So the goal was, we need to rescue this. We need to turn it in. And you kind of felt like, well, I have a great experience in Florida doing this. You mentioned the kind of the words high-end strip club. Tell me the difference. What makes a strip club high-end? Is it just strictly the overall amenities? It's just there's a lot of plush like amenities and the people are better and more attractive? Do you go after a certain girl? What makes something high-end as far as a strip club?
Well, it's the build out. Number one, you build it's like building a higher end restaurant or a Burger King, right? The way the staff dresses, the service, the hospitality, the menu, the prices, the marketing, all those kinds of things. Blue Trick knew nothing. He basically set it up to meet more little boys because he was really into sports. He was a degenerate gambler. And unbeknownst to me, they embezzled an insurance company for $400 million.
Yes.
So I did not know that either when they got there. And he brought in another partner, Lyle Pfeffer, who had a mortgage company. And he was in on that $400 million scam that I did not know at that time either. And basically I made a deal with Lyle. Michael really had nothing to do with anything.
So what were your first, with this new project at Scores, what were your what were some goals that you had for the place? Like, how were you going to get it to be what you believed it could be? What were the things you were going to institute from them and said, hey, you're failing. Here's what I'm going to do to fix it. What were some of those ideas?
Right. So in my book, I write a chapter, Retool and Reboot, and that discusses all that. The room, when you build a restaurant, so they had it set up as a sports bar with a couple of side stages. They wanted to watch the games and have girls walking around in football jerseys and eating cheeseburgers and drinking beer.
Yeah.
And that's just a no-go. You're selling beauty. You cannot underestimate the power of a pretty girl. It's like electricity going through the room. So they had no idea how to recruit girls. Plus, when you build a restaurant, the kitchen goes there, the bar goes there, the dining room goes in the middle. Hopefully you got a good location, good management, great food, a good chef, and you got a shot. In a strip club, there's so many what we call points of sales, areas of revenue. How the club is laid out is very important. Where the bar is, where the main room is, where the main stage is, the champagne room. Where there was a basketball court, I put a service bar. We did a massive overhaul in there. We remodeled the whole club. So
really smart.
Properly, so when the guest walks in, he saw elevated silhouettes of beautiful girls.
I learned that, and this is kind of a random connection, but like that show Bar Rescue, that John Taffer guy, like I never realized like how important, like where certain things are, like, in a bar, like what you notice, like it's kind of a science. I never really thought of it like that, but you mentioned recruiting girls, which we all know the two type of strip club girls, right? It's the one's in, Yazoo City, Mississippi, that just happen to live there and they just need a job, and it doesn't matter if they're pregnant or not. They're up there stripping. But then there's the high quality girls. How do you find those girls? What does it take to recruit them? Are they kind of in is there like a Rolodex? You just call them? Do you just go out in the street and look for attractive women and say, hey, do you want to come dance? Like, how does that work?
Well, being in the business, that's the hardest thing to do, is to have quality women. Yeah, so if you have a small club, you can get a girl that lives in a trailer park and she'll dance in work boots and an American flag bikini.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. We don't want those girls.
A more high-end club, you're going to recruit from other clubs. So I sent someone to Fort Lauderdale to steal girls from other clubs.
Did you? Is that what you did? Really? Wow.
Yeah. The science of it was, and this is, you got to think how strippers, we called them entertainers back then, but strippers think. They were dancing for $10 a song, naked, in Fort Lauderdale. Every city has a different nudity code, where sometimes you can't be topless. Sometimes you got to wear, you see girls with like helicopters on their nipples and stuff like that.
Yes.
You can't. In Florida, you could be naked. It's in South Florida anyway. And they were getting $10 a song. So I sent a guy down there to sit at the club, recruit him with plane tickets, and say, well, why don't you dance for $20 a song up in New York, and you could keep your bottoms on, and we'll pay your hotel for a few weeks. So there was a massive recruiting thing going on. Plus, the Competitors Club in New York, the guy I used to work for, I sold a couple of his managers, and they brought a couple of the girls over. The most important thing is the girls have to make money. If the girls make money, all is well. That's the foundation.
Was there and I don't need, you don't have to mention names, was there a particular girl that you remember that was just way better than all the others? Like, she just had it, where people would come in and request her, and were there a lot of girls like that, or were they all just kind of
wound up with? Every girl was like that, but in the beginning
they were all like that. Okay.
The place was the land of the misfit strippers.
Right.
And I'll tell you how that happened. When I was working for the other company in New York at the Dollhouse and Stringfellows Pure Platinum, girls would come in applying for jobs. And if they were not up to the standard, or basically you could just say should not be dancing with their clothes off, too fat, not attractive enough, we would send them to Scores. Scores is hiring, and a manager who's like, man, I need girls. We can't open without girls. It's a strip club. He would just hire anybody. So when I got to Scores, all the misfit strippers were there that I had sent there.
So you had to get a problem. Yeah, that is a major problem.
I got to ask you, girls that were pretty, of course. And what you do is you walk around the club and just make personal deals. I take a girl over to the side. I said, listen, sweetie, I need your help. We got to make this club great. We need some girls. If you know anybody, and what happens is these girls that strip work sometimes or live in other states. They'll go into a dressing room in another club and say, man, Scores is great. You're going to make a lot of money. Our marketing was geared towards the Wall Street boys. The .com boom was boom.
Yep.
Wall Street was booming then. So that's where the money is, right?
So it was all about
make sure these girls would make over $1,000 a night. And to talk about that beautiful girl, we were filled with such, in the beginning, the girls were not attractive at all, to keep it nice. I fired a lot of them. I basically stripped the club down to 6 girls, and that club wound up with 150 girls a night. But in the beginning, I stripped it down to 6 and maybe 2 managers and me, because Blue Trick had his gay boyfriend running the place. I don't care if people are gay or straight. I don't care about, but the kid was a thief. Yeah, I mean, everybody was stealing, and there was another guy involved in the place, Mark Yakow, who was a friend of mine, and his cousin Larry was running the place. I don't know if this is political. He's a gay guy, and I could care less if he was gay, but he was robbing the place blind as well.
Right.
He set up a catering company. That's what I'm saying. The scams that I had to uncover was as hard as creating the club. He had his own catering company that he was billing the restaurant or Scores for his bill, and then running his own catering company out of that.
So there were just a lot of things going on behind the scenes. Scams.
But to get back to the girl thing, because sometimes I get off because there's so much.
Yeah.
We went down to Florida, and there was this gorgeous woman that worked in Fort Lauderdale. She was in Penthouse, and her name was Samantha. And she was just an 11. So I sent my guy down to Fort Lauderdale. I said, whatever you do, get Samantha. We need her. We brought her up. My father had an apartment on 47th Street and 3rd Avenue with a rooftop kind of patio. I put her in the apartment. He was in Florida at the time, and she was gorgeous. And then her first day there, she's sunbathing topless on the roof. And, you know, you have all those big buildings in New York.
Nice.
And everybody's like got their face planted to the window. So my father got a call from the building management with the topless girl on his patio. And he called me up. He goes, what's going on? I go, I put this really pretty girl in your apartment for a couple of weeks. Because they used to, like an old man watering his basil and his parsley on the roof. Right. And then they saw this beautiful girl. But then I brought it to the club. And I said, listen, whatever you need, you come to me. Don't worry about management. I gave her back to my mother in the dressing room. She was gorgeous to begin with. And I put her on the side stage. I built the new main stage, but I wanted right on the side stage next to the bar. And I huddled our security, which is a whole nother story. And I huddled all our management, which is how I created that. And that girl got up on the pole and everybody just froze. They'd never seen a girl that beautiful. And
so you were getting...
Feel it? And they're like, oh, yeah. I said, do you feel it? And they're like, oh, yeah. That's what we need. You get it now?
Got it.
Oh, we got it now because there's really no one to explain that electricity.
So that was kind of the type of person you wanted. It all kind of came together. Let me ask you just one other thing with the woman you're bringing in. Are there certain rules they have to follow working there? Like, is there a drug policy? Is there a, you know, like, are we maintaining just a certain level of professionalism? Because strip clubs can be a little, you know.
We didn't allow drugs on the premises. They had to wear a dress. So, you know, I didn't make them wear full evening gowns because I thought they didn't. That's what my competitor made them do, and the girls didn't like that. But they had to wear like at least a knee-length skirt. They had to be made up and looking pretty. I got rid of the schedule, which would help, which was a big recruiting tool. I kind of reversed a lot of the policies of the guy I used to work for because I was mad at him and I really wanted to wipe him out. So I just said, listen, come in, no schedule. Girls like that. But the no schedule thing, which everyone has now, but then everyone had a schedule. Listen, Monday through Friday, give me 4 days a week, any 4 days you want. If you work Saturday or Sunday, which are the slowest days in a strip club in New York City, if you work a Saturday, you only need to work that one Saturday. If you work a Sunday, you only need to work that one Sunday, and then you can work any day of the week you want.
Gotcha.
And then we would track it, and if girls weren't paying attention to it, we just have a little talk with them. We need your help. But when they make money, they come to work.
Absolutely.
That's like all of us.
Absolutely.
You know.
So you're kind of
$1,000 a day in 1994.
Yeah. So, no, that's great money. So you're noticing that you're taking the era of different people and saying, I'm going to take this era and I'm going to do it totally different. And I'm going to start building something. And we're going to get into how the mob plays into this. Cause as you start making money, the leeches start coming. I do want to mention though, and I'm not going to go over all the tips, but in your book, one of your chapters is Craig Carlino's tips for not getting taken to the cleaners from women. And I have to read this one little thing that you wrote. You wrote, these may seem like common sense no-brainers, but even the smartest, most successful men often fall prey to strippers' charms. It's been said that a stiff dick has no conscience. That rule applies to the brain as well where men are concerned. And I got to read some of these rules that you have given because you've been around some of the most beautiful women in the world. Number one, never ask a stripper to dinner. They're used to charging for their time. Used to getting $10 to $20 for a 3-minute set. Hence, a 2-hour dinner could be very costly. She'll expect that money too. Now, if you don't pay, she'll bring down the wrath of God on your ass, and you're in for a shitload of headaches, which makes sense. But what I find very interesting, Craig, is nowadays we hear the word sugar daddy, right? And we're getting to the point with women where all women expect this. Now, back in your day, only the strippers acted like that. Now, every woman acts like that, it seems like. And one other one, a stripper, in terms of what I just said, does not make for a good girlfriend. She'll expect you to pay for everything, her rent, her car, her clothing. And if you say no to even the smallest item, she will get very angry, and you don't want that. Did you ever think someday, Craig, that all of these rules would now just apply to every woman? They're all like this now.
Well, to say every woman is like that is kind of
Most
rough,
are
but
younger.
okay.
My type of the women in my age group are like that for the most part.
Yeah, everyone's the whole country's built on money. But what
Yes,
I was trying to say was, if you're a married guy, right, the last thing you want to do is date a stripper, because she'll ruin your life. It's all about being on the meter and on the clock. You're better off dating a porno star. Quite frankly, they're sluts. They know they're sluts. They'll have sex at Yankee Stadium in front of 50,000 people and could care less.
Yeah.
I know a lot of them. Some of them work for me and are porno stars now, and they're really cool strippers. Everything's about money. Well, I could be working tonight and making $1,000, and you want to
Yeah, always hold that over you. Yeah.
Now, just to have sex with one, okay. If you want to fool around and get a hotel room, pay her for that, go home. I never knew why guys would have a girlfriend and a wife. It never made sense to me. You can fool around, keep the verbiage clean. You can go around, go in a hotel room, have sex, get your rocks off, for lack of a better word, and go home, And of course, you can't get caught either. That's another thing. Never admit that to your wife that you were fooling around. That's just stupid. You're going to hurt a feeling and ruin your life.
Did you get a kick out of
very well, even for myself personally?
Did you ever get a kick out of the guys that will come in there and think that, they're going to make these girls, because everybody's the biggest pimp in a strip club. And it's like, well, yeah, dude, they're strippers, of course. Did you get a kick out of some of the guys that will come in there and try to I'm going to make this girl my girlfriend? They all think like that, don't they? A lot of the guys.
Well, you know what it is? Men are so stupid, which is why they have strip clubs. And I always refer to it. I've said this before. Bill Clinton was president of the United States, right? And had sex in the Oval Office with a 22-year-old intern who wasn't the most attractive woman on the planet. Now, I'm a strip club operator. I'm going to get a hotel room or have sex in the office, or I had a private bathroom or whatever. Fine. I know what I am. Okay?
Yeah.
But at some point, you got to say to yourself, well, I'm president of the United States. Maybe that's a bad idea.
Yeah. We've seen that a lot recently.
This girl on the Resolute desk in the White House. So now if you take that way of thinking and just apply it to everyday men who are not present, and I'm sure there were more presidents than Bill Clinton having sex in the White House, right?
John Kennedy.
Everybody. Who knows? Now with so much media and everything, it's impossible. But back before the internet and all that stuff. So men just fall for that. We knew it. We taught the girls how to get their money and how to get that credit card out. But I also told the girls, you don't want to leave with the customers. We didn't allow it. And you don't want to see them outside the club. Because once the guy starts having sex with you, you lose a customer inside the club.
Sure, he's not going to come in anymore.
And I've seen a lot of marriages ruined. This guy owns a deli in Brooklyn, this schlumpy guy, and he's going out. He's got a wife and kids at home, and he's going out with this beautiful girl. And, he gets caught, and he admits it to his wife, which is nuts.
I've always been, Craig, it's always surprised me at the level of what a man will do for that. And most men, it's 5 minutes. It's not a lot of time. It's not like you're traveling the world with these women. But you even look at these guys like Blue Trick, who are really, they have money, that they're, I guess, somewhat powerful in a way, and they're willing to do some of these horrible things just for that 5 minutes. Or there'll be these guys that will ruin a beautiful life with a beautiful woman and kids, and they have lawn furniture. They're real people. They're regular people, and they go out and they ruin it for 5 minutes with a hot blonde just to do it. It's always amazing how people are willing to ruin their life over sex, isn't it?
Well, that's the whole business now. I said beautiful girls are the key, right?
Sure.
So the sexual energy. I got in a fight with one of the owners when I was remodeling the club, because I took out all those restaurant tables, those big square tables, and I put in little barrel tables that were 18 inches round, and put barrel chairs, chairs on wheels around it so guys could get rounds of drinks. And he
Yeah.
got like, he threatened to beat me up, this guy. He was a partner, Mark. We wound up being friends. Mark Yakel was his name. He threatened to kick my ass because I took those tables out. And I don't profess to be a tough guy, but him I could have taken. No problem. I said, dum-dum, I want guys buying rounds of drinks.
Sure.
One guy eats a cheeseburger with onions and French fries. Forget about the breath issue because you don't want to turn the girl off. And he drinks a Coke. He's not going to drink martinis or bourbons or scotches or bottles of champagne when watching a game, eating a burger. You want guys ordering rounds of drink. We had food in the club, but it was more like finger food. Just
sure.
2, 3 in the morning, people are drunk.
It's so smart, man. You really thought of everything. Like,
oh yeah, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. I had everything.
But you know what's crazy? What you're telling me? Like, I've never been to a strip club in my life. Never. I find them to be really kind of sad places, quite honestly. But one thing that when I go out, I don't want to eat anything because I don't want like that. Like I brush my teeth before I go out. I don't want to have like food on my breath because I'm talking to girl, like I'm talking to people. I don't want to. It's amazing you thought of that. I never really think of that. And who wants that? You just want little things. We don't want you to buy food. We want you to buy alcohol, which is much more on a markup standpoint. You buy a bottle of Cristal, that's a lot more than a steak or a cheeseburger. That's
and you want the waitresses. Listen, all waitresses and bartenders were all female, and they were gorgeous too.
Yeah,
beautiful. So you want the waitresses to walk out there with a lot of money as well. Plus, we sold funny money. It's like a monopoly money because guys don't have cash on them. Right. We sold like 15, 16 million a year in that, and we made like 40% on it. Guys could charge a dance. So I had floor managers walking around. I had to hire them because the security guys were all Italian guys from the Bronx. They had too much ego for them. So I hired hospitality hosts, young guys that were hungry. They'd make $500-600 a night. And all the tough young guys, I want to say the mob-connected security we had.
You're talking about like Willie Marshall, people like that?
Sorry?
Willie Marshall, he was a security guy.
Willie Marshall came later. He wasn't working there at the time.
Okay. But so what you're saying is you had, this is something like you take $1,000 and it's like you prepay essentially. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So you come into the club. Here's how it would go. You walk up the steps and there's a bar to the left, which was in the front, which was important because the guy could go to the bar and feel comfortable and take it all in. Mm-hmm. So you always look through the customer's eyes to see what they're seeing, right? They're seeing this massive place. New York never had these clubs before, so they don't know where to go, what to do. So we would have a host, get in white dinner jackets with name tags, hotel-type hospitality, greet the guy, say, hey, how many are you? Oh, there are 2. You want a table? Sure. Sit down. No charge for a table. Sit down. The waitress would come over, say, can I get you guys a drink? Put down the cocktail napkin. Yeah, we'll have this, we'll have that. Then the host would come over, give him his card, and say, my name's whatever. You guys okay? If you need anything, let me know. Here's a couple of girls over here. You want me to bring them over and introduce you? You want to get the party started, right? So sometimes guys need help. So the girls would come over, and it's, you tell the guy, look, it's $20 a song for a table dance. And, but you could buy the girl by the hour or just make a money deal with her. Some guys like the dances, and there was some guys like just having the company to talk to. And say, well, we don't have any cash on us. So I created these diamond dolls that looked like Monopoly money where we could take the guy's credit card. We had a cage like in a casino. Where you could go over, charge the guy's card. Let's say he wanted $1,000. It was in $20 increments. And we charged 20% to the customer and then charge the girl 20% to cash it in. And these are gift certificates. So think of that. You're a sports guy, right? That's a pretty good big 20 points on every transaction.
Wow.
So you're very lucrative.
That's a great idea.
And that's a great idea. Like this bright purple. So if guys had leftover money when they brought it home, and it had like a picture of a naked girl on it, they had to throw it away because they didn't want their wives to catch them with it. Sure. So that's how the funny money thing worked. And of course, all the mob guys, they always had funny money scams going. And that's a whole nother story. But for the guest, it was good. You could charge a dance, and you could only use the money for tipping. You couldn't use it for liquor or door entry or anything like that. That's really smart. I mean, you kind of hit every level. I want to ask you about, so you obviously are becoming successful in the 90s, right? You're making money. You've got all sorts of things coming in. You got,
liquor, you got the girls, you got the funny, you got all this stuff. People are making money, and who turns up? The mafia, right? You're in Manhattan. This is, as far as we know, Gambino territory, Genovese territory. And look, I've told you this. I know Steve Sergio. I've talked to Steve before. I've done the show on Michael. How does all this happen? So you're working with Michael. You've kind of turned this club inward. You're making money. It's becoming a place where people want to come. When's the first connection to the mob happen, and who is it?
Well, they were already there when I got there.
Who was involved? Mikey Hop?
Mikey Hop was there, who was Steve's father.
Yep.
And when he saw things started percolating there a little bit, he came to the club.
And when we say Mikey Hop, you're referring to Mike Sergio. Mike was in the crew of Frankie Loke, right?
That's right. So Mikey Hop knew Michael Bluetrick. They had a problem when they first opened before I got there. When Scores tried to open, two mob guys came in. I don't know their names. Said, this is our... No one had a club in New York without some connection to the mob. You don't juggle with swords unless you practice with apples. You
knew that going into it. You were okay with that?
Huh?
You knew that going in. You were all right with that?
Yeah. So he comes and talks to me. He says, listen, if you need anything, I liked him. He was okay with me. He goes, listen, if you need anything, just don't ever lie to me. Keep your nose clean, all that kind of stuff. I didn't know him that well. He wasn't a big money guy. His son, Steve, who I got along with pretty good. Steve had security there. And Steve would earn from the security contract. And he had the coat room, which I turned into a massive money. He was making $10,000 a week from the coat room.
That's amazing.
And he really, before that, he was there. The club was failing. And the thing I had with Steve was when I first met him, I said, look, man, I need your 4 security guys to put on white dinner jackets and work the floor. They'll make some money, blah, 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 blah. And they would throw bar cherries at my head, olives at my head from the bar. And they just had no respect for me at all, these security guys. Well, as we started getting a little busier and Steve started making a little money, then we kind of won them over. And they still refused to give any type of service or hospitality, like I mentioned before, get the party started and shake guys' hands, this and that. So I sat down with Steve one day. I said, look, man, your guys don't want to listen to me right now, or they don't want to work, or they got too much ego to give service and hospitality, pull out a chair for a guest, light a guest cigarette, put down an ashtray. You could smoke in the club in those days. So he goes, yeah, sure, whatever. I said, how's this? Just let them. Plus, they were beating up people every night. So that's not really a good, beating up the customers.
Not good either.
When you're trying to build up a club, it's not really a good idea, right? So I said to Steve, I said, listen, why don't you have you guys just sit and have dinner every night? If something political comes up, or I started speaking his language, if someone needs a beating, at least you're here to protect us. Well, you're not going to mess with our money, right? Not that I had the right to mess with his money, but if I would say something to the owners, more Pfeffer I dealt with, they were starting to believe in me a little bit now. So I had sway with them. Plus, his father told him, do what Craig says because we're doing well. So Steve said, all right. He let the guys have dinner. And then I hired 4 guys to walk around the floor and give service and hospitality because they had too much ego to do that.
So,
that was, how the genesis of the service and hospitality on the floor, and also stop the fights. Stop.
Right. Don't beat up our people. Right.
Yeah. Don't beat up everybody because, what it was like the movie Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. I mean, it was crazy.
On a weekly basis, what's the club pulling in, and what is the mob getting out of that?
Well, when I first got there, the club was doing about $25,000 a week. I got it up to about $400,000 a week in 1994, which was massive.
Wow.
Mike Sergio was pulling $1,000 a week out of the club. He pleaded guilty and cooperated with all this anyway. So
yes, he did.
And he was pulling $1,000 a week out of the club. Pfeffer and Bluetrick, I said, you better give the guy a little more money because he's going to ask for more. As we started getting busier, his son had the coat room. And then, then I would take, not that Mike charged me every week, but he really helped me get paid. Once my checks got up to 15, 20,000 a week via my management contract, they really always never really wanted to pay me on time or the right amount. So Mike would help get me paid. And then, of course, I didn't have a weekly deal with him, but, if he wanted to go to Vegas, I buy him plane tickets, or I bought him a nice watch for Christmas, or a TV, or a Rolex. I had a pretty good relationship with Mike Sergio.
Yeah, Mike seemed like a guy, like he didn't take much. I mean, $1,000 is nothing, right, in the grand scheme of things. And his son, obviously younger, a little bit more entitled, probably felt like he could steal. And look, I've talked to him. He's told me that, I was stealing. We were doing what we had to do. I got to ask, though, and I know that you had run-ins, and this is where it kind of gets a little tough for you. You had run-ins with Greg DePalma, right?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, after 2 years, I mean, there's so much happened between those first 2 years. Mike Sergio comes. Now we have an office on Park Avenue. We all got big offices. Everybody's got nice suits. Everybody's got big cars, limousines. Greg Sergio comes in and says, DePalma wants $5,000 a week from you. And I just flat out refused. I wouldn't do it. I said, no, I'm not giving it to you. He says, well, then you're going to get fired. I go, well, see what happens. And then a couple days later, I wasn't getting along with Lyle Pfeffer then either. They wanted to get rid of me because they didn't want to pay me what they were paying me. But I had a contract. He fired my secretary, who was a personal friend of mine, and I went into his office and lost my temper, screaming and yelling at him. He was a little guy. And, of course, they used that to kind of move me out of the office, so to speak. I put it in the book. No one knows this, but the next day on my way to work, I bought a chainsaw, and I was going to the office, and I had a chainsaw in my trunk because Lyle Pfeffer had just paid like 10 grand for a new desk. And my plan was to saw his desk in half. And
you never did that?
Kind of took over and said, what are you, stupid? I mean, they're going to get you on attempted murder. Imagine you walk into an office.
Oh, yeah.
I was, I wanted to send a message like, that shit's crazy. But I wound up talking myself out of it. I go, they're not going to get what I'm trying to do. So I didn't do it. But they had me pretty upset and incensed. I never ran to the cops. I could have when they were asking me for $5,000 a week. At the same time, I'd simultaneously built a restaurant with Paul Sorvino, the guy, the actor from Goodfellas. So I was there, and they sent over a termination letter to the restaurant, firing me because I didn't want to pay $5,000 a week.
So over 5,000. So they didn't realize, hey, without this guy, we wouldn't have the 400,000 we're making a week. This guy's built this up, and we're gonna. So DePalma wanted you out because you weren't going to play ball with him. That's kind of what we're going here.
He was spreading rumors that I was a junkie, that I was a drug addict, which none of those things were true. And a friend of mine at the time, Steve Kaplan, owned the Gold Club. And I was helping him. I turned that club around too, but that's another story, in Atlanta. And he said, listen, I'm friends with John Jr., and I'm friends with Mikey Scars. You're not fired. And I'm like, okay, what do you mean? He goes, no, you're not fired. Steve wanted to take over Scores as well. He's trying to help me. So I want to get the timing right. We had a couple of meetings, and he says, come on, we're going to Brooklyn. So I went to Brooklyn and met Mikey Scars in an alley, who I did not know. And he was Junior's right-hand man. You could have called him the underboss, maybe, of the Gambinos at the time. And Steve, I said, are you sure you know what you're doing, man? You're taking me to an alley? And I met a lot of wise guys in the club, and street guys, and really bad guys as well. Everybody was pretty good with me because I walked around with a certain amount of respect for people. So I was able to navigate that world well. I was always respectful. I was always polite. So I got along with everyone. But driving to an alley in Brooklyn to meet a guy named Mikey Scars, who I'd never met, was kind of scary to me. And I met Mike, and he says, look, I know the situation. You go back in and don't worry about anything. I'll take care of it.
Wow. So
and I'm like, well,
wow,
I don't know about that. And then there was DePalma was spreading rumors that I was a junkie, and they had me on tape doing coke which was not true. So I wanted to squash that as well. So I said, listen, as far as this junkie thing, you know, they throw around the rat word a lot, the junkie word a lot. None of that pertained to me. I said, Mike, and I knew who I was talking to. If you have anything that has me on tape doing drugs, I will give you $500,000 in cash that day. So he goes, no, man, I can see the type of guy you are. You know, I spoke real straight with him. Mike was a businessman. I wish I would have known him better, because I know better now, but I didn't know him that well then. So as I drive back, we meet. He goes, just stay close with Steve and you'll be okay. Unbeknownst to me, De Palma made the move to take without clearance from Junior or Mike. They went and tried to extort me without their knowledge, or made a move on the club. The reason why De Palma was able to make a move on the club is because Frankie Loke was in jail, and his son Torrey very wisely wanted nothing to do with the place. He told Mikey Scars, he said, listen, those Jews are rats, quote unquote. They're rats before they became rats. They wound up becoming rats. This was way before. So no one really wanted anything to do with it, which is why Mike Sergio, who basically wasn't a made guy, wasn't straightened out, wound up with the place, because nobody else really wanted it until De Palma started sniffing money.
Yes, and he all of a sudden showed up.
Now,
so he felt like he could slither his way in because nobody else wanted it, and it's just open territory, so I'll do what I want. Little did he know you had a connection to Stevie Kaplan, who had a connection in turn to the acting boss at the time of the family, John Jr., and his boy Mikey Scars. So they kind of, you know, fixed it for you. And did you hear from De Palma again?
I turned the deal down. I never went back in. I went home, and Steve said, see, I told you you're going to be fine as we're driving back. I got to tell you, Jeff, I did not feel comfortable around those Gambino guys. People would whisper in my ear, hey, I heard you made $20,000 last week. Someone I didn't even know. Well, this guy's here. Everybody knew how much money I was making. Everybody was counting my money. So I went back to my restaurant on 3rd Avenue, and I met with Angelo Prisco, who, you know, he is, right? Yeah.
Of course.
And,
how'd you know Angelo?
So Angelo, there was a guy that worked for me, knew Angelo. He was kind of a host, so to speak. I don't want to mention his name because he's still
okay.
around, but he was a good guy and a big guy, and wherever I went, he went. I didn't ask for that. He just followed me everywhere, and we wound up becoming friends. And he was more in tune with that world that my mother moved me out of in the first place, remember? So
yeah.
He said, listen, I'm going to introduce you to someone. And when I met Angelo Prisco, I really liked him. I sat down with him. He was a good guy. I didn't know much from that world, you know, because I was taken out of it, but I was starting to learn real quick. And he says, listen, man, I'm not telling you what to do, but if you take the deal, you're going to be with them. And everything you do from now on, they're going to have their hoofs into you. And I just did not know what to do. I had to think about it. I wound up turning the deal down from Mikey Scars, which in hindsight was a mistake because I really like Mike. He's smart. He wasn't like those other Gambino guys. He had a big picture in mind. We've spoken since. And but I wound up turning the deal down and suing Scores for the breach of contract. And then, of course, they were threatening my life to drop the lawsuit. That was the next level of that, so to speak.
Can you say who was threatening your life? De Palma? Maybe?
Yes. Yeah.
Did you feel he was capable? Did you feel they were capable of doing that?
Oh, they were, as the word goes, they were capable of certainly giving me a beating or put me in the hospital for months. So once I turned the deal down, Mikey Scars kind of wiped his hands of it.
Yeah.
And so did Junior. I'd like to thank John for looking out for me. I never met him. Everybody said, you know, I used to walk around the club throwing his name around. The feds asked me that. I never met the guy. I still never met the guy. But I know he helped me out in a couple of things.
Let me ask you. I have to interject because it seems like what you're telling me, like John Jr. and Mikey Scars were looking out for you, but you in turn realized if I go into business with these guys, then they're dug in. They're always going to be involved. Did you feel Prisco was? I mean, because don't you think he would have probably did that too at some point? These guys are all gangsters in the end, and isn't John Jr. and Mikey Scars way better than Gregory De Palma? I mean, you're gonna have to do business with them regardless. So why not do it with guys that at least were there for you when you had a tough time?
The threats and the violence, the threats were becoming unbearable to me. My father was on his deathbed when they fired me.
Gotcha.
And I went to visit him at New York Hospital, NYU Hospital. I told him the story. I said, Dad, I'm suing these guys. I turned the deal down. They want me to drop the lawsuit. They owe me $1 million and change, blah, blah. He's like, well, I'm going to tell you something. If a judge tells you you're not owed any money, you won't like it, but you can live with it. But don't let them tell you that. So he opened his drawer. He had a week to live and handed me his 38, which surprised me. Yeah. And because he wasn't violent, my dad. You couldn't mess with him. He had that Sicilian temper for sure, but he was a good guy. He was a straight guy. He was, he was a legit guy. He wasn't one of those wise guys. But he knew
probably the only guy you ever dealt with that was a real legit guy.
Yeah.
Try to do right,
So I said, do me a favor. I said, you got a week to live. This is another time. I was so out of my mind. I said, get out of bed and go kill Pfeffer and Blue Trick for me. You got a week to live anyway. And he told me, you are out of your effing mind. I go, yeah, you're probably right, but do it anyway. Of course, he didn't. So I walked around with that 38 on me to protect myself.
Yeah.
And I went back to the restaurant and met Angelo again, showed him I had it. And he kind of liked that. He's like, that's my boy. And I said, okay, now I want you to set me up with a meeting with De Palma. I wanted to go in. De Palma wouldn't meet with me. It shows balls and this kind of thing. I'm like, I don't know about showing balls. See, Jeff, if De Palma would have came to my office and said, listen, Mike Sergio ain't a made guy. I'm a skipper. I got to get paid from this place. All I had to do was raise the house fee $20 a girl.
All right, you'd have been fine.
We had 100 girls a night. That's $2,000 a day. Okay? He would have been happy as hell. And it would have been, I could have raised the house because our house fee was cheap to begin with. Instead of attacking me, and I never ran to the cops. Everyone was calling me a rat because I sued him. That day, when Sergio asked me for $5,000, I could have went right to the cops and say, listen, they're trying to extort me, blah, blah, blah. They would have arrested me and I could have kept my job and kept everyone out. Just wasn't wired that way to do that. I was kind of straddling both worlds. And Angelo, again, he'd come to my restaurant and have dinner and always pay. He'd bring his crew, these young guys from the Bronx, and everyone was always nice to me and always pay. So I met Andrew Gigante as well. And
how was he?
Great. Good guy with me. I don't mind working with people if it's a two-way street. That was my mindset then. But to feel like a mark, to feel like a sucker, that bothered me a lot.
Well, I will tell you, Craig, and just interject. I've talked to Jack Garcia twice. He's the guy who infiltrated Greg, the FBI agent. And I've come to realize about Greg, because I feel like I know a good amount about him. He seemed like one of the more slimy people that I've ever looked into. It just seemed like every single thing. And Garcia told me a story that at one point they were down in Manhattan somewhere and he stole like children's toys. Like that's the kind of guy he was. Like, fuck him.
I don't know anyone that liked him.
That's what I heard. He talked a lot too. He's a coqueron, if you will. He'd always had something to say.
Mikey Scars were like, this guy's running rogue. He never ran this by us. And I just continued with the lawsuit. And Angelo's like, he came back again. Look, man, they want you to drop the lawsuit. I'm like, well, I'm not. He said, that's fine. They know I'm around you now, but they're still claiming you're with them. He said, well, I don't want to be with them. I walked out with nothing. with a few
Wow.
years left on my management contract. He goes, yeah, well, they don't really think that way, but in here, I can protect you. But if you walk into the parking lot to your car, be careful in the street. So I armed myself and just made a decision. If anyone attacked me, I would just shoot him and worry about. And I'm not violent. I don't want to come off like a tough guy or a bad guy, but certainly I was going to defend myself.
Right.
And I wasn't going to get in a street fight with, they weren't going to send bosses to beat me up. They'd send, all these young jacked up guys, Italian guys like John A. Light and those kind of guys, who were young then, and they would have put me in a coma for 3 months. They were so big. Willie Marshall came, who I always liked. And Willie threatened me, but not really. This is another interesting story. He comes to the restaurant and says, listen, man, you got to drop that lawsuit, Craig. I'm like, well, I'm not dropping it. And by the way, I want nothing to do with the mafia. I'm suing theft from Blue Trick. They breached my management contract. But they were kind of they were paying De Palma to get me to drop the lawsuit. These were the criminals at Scores, theft from Blue Trick. The mob guys were no problem to deal with. These were the lowest form of life on the planet. Everything in Blue Trick's book is BS. The guy's a pathological liar, which is why, I might add, he became a federal witness and got 40 years in prison anyway. Sammy Gravano killed 19 people and got off, right? This guy killed no one. It was financial crimes. They knew
he's a bad guy. Sure.
U.S. attorney went and negotiated him and down to 25 years. Of course, he helped. And Blue Trick couldn't testify because he was a pedophile. So he couldn't testify either. So a lot of this stuff I'm finding out. So Willie says to me, listen, man, I'd hate to see anything happen to you, Craig. You're a good guy. And then he goes back and tells De Palma, what'd you tell Carlino? He says, I told him I'd chop him up with an axe if he didn't drop the lawsuit. The reason I know this is because the U.S. attorney and the feds came to my house and played me the tape that Willie said that.
Wow.
Willie, he became a witness too.
Yes, he did.
But he was swearing up and down that he never said that to me. And he was right. He never did. He never did. And then Angelo basically came to me again. He's like, man, how you doing? We'd come for dinner and we were friends. I'd see him like 1, 2, 3 days a week. He invited me to the feast in the Bronx, not San Gennaro, but they had another feast.
Giglio.
My wife and his wife. I mean, I really felt comfortable with him. Mikey Scars, who I became a little friendly with, was like, well, he was just being nice to you, but he knew you were a cash cow too. I said, well, that's okay. At least with Angelo said, look, go open somewhere else and no one will mess with you. We'll worry about who you're with down the road. So I was trying to get a new club deal and have Angelo around me. That was the objective because I felt comfortable with him. Every other club was paying a mob guy in those days. Don't let anyone tell you different. And no, not now. It's not necessary, but then you had to have that. So the final straw was I was walking to my car one day, and I used to walk with my hand on the trigger of that revolver, but the gun was in my briefcase. So I would kind of walk around with the briefcase in front of me, and I got approached by 2 or 3 guys wearing masks, and I pulled out the gun and I started, I'll kill all of you if you come any closer, and they all took off. Thank God they took off.
Wow.
I didn't want, but I would worry about then that, Mikey Scars tells me, what were you going to take on? The whole Gambino family? Certainly wasn't my objective. No. My objective was to save myself from being in a coma for 3 months. I figured I'd worry about the rest after that.
I got to figure, Craig, you were a stubborn guy, but you stuck to your laurels, man. I mean, that's, you were owed something and you never got it. Did it all end really with just the indictments that came down and that was that?
Well, I wound up dropping the lawsuit because Angelo just kept telling me he was protecting me so much from them. And there were instances where Willie came to the restaurant with a bunch of guys, and they might have come to rough me up that night another time, and Angelo just happened to be there. So they didn't do anything. They sat and had dinner. He goes, listen, man, I'm just telling you, do you really want to shoot somebody? I said, of course not, but I have to protect myself.
Right.
He said, drop the lawsuit, go open wherever you want. So I did, and that was one of the worst days of my life. And then Steve Kaplan got in trouble in Atlanta, I flew down to help him when the minute he got in trouble. And he had an attorney named Larry Brunson, who was a big criminal attorney at the time, and Jay Goldberg, another big attorney who was one of Trump's attorneys at the time, I think as well. And Jay says, man, I got to shake your hand. You wouldn't rat anyone out. You didn't run to the cops. You're a good guy. And as I was helping Steve with Steve had a criminal charge against him. Larry Brunson, his big time criminal charge, says, you can reopen your Scores case. I said, what do you mean? Well, it was a year or two later. The feds had, got everyone out of the club. Someone else had owned it. Pfeffer and Blue Trick were in jail. De Palma was already out. Now there was just too much heat on the place.
Sure.
Take it down. So I reopened the lawsuit and busted through the release and got a settlement. Someone else had to sue who was owning the club. That was a nightmare too, but wound up getting paid. Of course, I had $400,000 in legal fees. It's expensive, but we wound up walking out with some money. But more important, I just wanted to close it, get it behind me, and move on.
Well, in the end, you won in a way. You got a little money out of it. You have a wild story to tell, and I know you're working on a book, which I think is going to be interesting. It's funny. I wanted to mention to you before I get into kind of wrap this up. I got some questions for you and some of these people. I spoke to on a separate matter somebody from the New York Post recently, and he says to me, he goes, you know a lot of people. I said, I do. He goes, anybody involved with Scores? And I said, yeah. I said, I know a couple of guys. So your story, Steve, all you guys, like there's a wild story in this. People love the strip club, the mob. It's a fascinating story. And you are not a mob guy, but you sure as hell were around a lot of them. And you lived an interesting life. You never went to jail, which is good. That's what you want. And I think people like Michael Blue Trick were exposed for the parasites that they were. I got to ask you a couple of questions on these people. One of which, you mentioned you met a lot of crazy guys in that life. Do you have one that just kind of stuck out to you as, if I ever was around that individual and he was mad at me, it wouldn't be good? Can you name one?
I'm not going to name these people because he's
You're not going to name? Okay.
They're all very dangerous guys that would hang out at Scores, and they were always nice to me. Thank God. I'd walk around. They'd be at the bar, having their drinks, eating something, and I knew who they were, but I would not.
So they're still around today.
Names now, not just because I'd be afraid, but just not the right thing to do.
Yeah, and they're around. That's fair. That's fine.
They're still around, So I wouldn't want to mention names, but just
of guys that are dead. Do you have anyone that stuck out to you?
That's why I talk about Angelo so much, because he's not here with us anymore. I talk about Palmas, even though I didn't like them because they're not here. So all the guys Mike Sergio's passed away. So all the guys I'm talking about are really not with us anymore.
They would have did what they had to do.
There's no one really. There are 3 or 4 guys that were really scary, but I don't want to mention their names, But like I said, they were good to me. I just knew how to. I'd say hello, goodbye. Hey, you want to have a drink? I would have a drink. Hey, you want to go to dinner later? No, I got to get home. My wife just had a baby.
That's all it was.
And I can't move it,
I had to laugh because I mentioned this to Steve, and I'm sure you'll agree. Steven Sergio was called in the indictment Sigmund the Sea Monster, Rich. Yeah. I asked him about that, and he had told me, he said, Jeff, he goes, first of all, I didn't meet Junior Gotti until the indictment. Number 2, no one ever called me that. I don't know where that came from. And he had told me the story that the federal prosecutor made it up. And it's funny because John Sr. gets the list of the names, and he made like a joke about it. I'm sure you've heard about that, but like you never heard anyone call him that, right?
No.
Yeah, I'd heard it's completely.
I see why they would call him that. He's got that. Big
why do you say that?
But like I said, I got along with Steve. I don't know what he's telling people. He was there with me.
No, he was okay with you.
Yeah, I never really had a problem with Steve. We became kind of as friendly as we could be. I didn't bother him at all. He came in. The club they really blew it, Pfeffer Blue Trick. I mean, there should have been so much wealth, and there should have been a Scores media company. And, we were so big, we didn't get into how I got Howard Stern into the club. That's another time maybe. And, he just didn't walk through the front door and say, hey, we're going to help you guys. There's a chapter in my book on how I got.
It's really a shame what they did to you, because you really built it into a modern day, Studio 54.
Right.
It was one of those types of places. Let me bring a few people up. Just give me one word to describe them. First thing you think about. You got a word?
I never met him. I know I had a couple of issues and he helped me out. So thanks, John, if you watch this. Met him once, liked him. I should have taken his deal, quite frankly, because when the FBI came to my house to question me, they knew I turned a deal down, which is why I didn't get in trouble.
Right.
I always asked him, if I took that deal, I would have made a few million, maybe $5 million over a couple of years. What would have happened to me? He says, well, you might have got, we would have asked to wire you up, which they did, and I wouldn't do it. I would never do that. And you probably would have got 2 years for conspiracy because I wasn't violent. And my money was not ill-gotten gains. I had a management contract.
Yeah, you had a job, right?
So, but I told Mike, I said, I should have taken your deal, and I would have if I'd known him better, but I didn't. So,
all right, one more. Give me one word to describe Greg DiPalma. Leech.
I'd say leech. Yeah. If it's one word,
Yeah.
leech. The mob used to call
He'd
him
always come across to me as leechy. Like if there was money, he was going to be there to collect it. And I'd also heard from Garcia. He had told me that like whenever like a big timer came around, so like when John Sr. came around, he would always brown nose, always give a bunch of money. Like you got to admit, he was a gangster.
His nickname was the Lighthouse. That's what they used to call him because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. That guy Garcia gave DiPalma a cell phone to use for free. Yeah. Now, what mob skipper is going to use a cell phone that somebody gives them? They shouldn't be on the phone in the first place. Like,
did you ever meet Jack Garcia or no?
Sorry?
Did you ever meet Jack Garcia?
No, I read a couple of things. I read that story.
So you had never seen him around DiPalma or anything?
No. DiPalma never came to the club. I met Craig DiPalma, the son, once. He had a strip club in the Bronx called Pretty Woman. He wanted me to send him girls from Scores, and I wouldn't do it. And he got a little angry at me, like, who does he think he is? Who is he? It's our joint. You get all that kind of guy. But the fact of the matter is, how could I take these beautiful, sweet, innocent girls from Central Florida or Texas and they talk like this and y'all and put them in the Bronx?
Right. Yeah, it wouldn't work.
With Johnny Onions and Nicky Scoopatuna and Joe Brown. I mean, it just wouldn't have worked. Too many cowboys. Which is why we didn't do clubs in Brooklyn or Queens or the Bronx. Just wasn't Manhattan. Manhattan had certain, patois to it, for lack of a better word.
It's not the glitzy, glammy world of Manhattan. Right. So let me ask you, Craig, what are you working on now? You're working on the book, obviously. I got to tell you, I mean, you should own some clubs now. I mean, what
I went back into restaurants, which was kind of a mistake. I do consulting work for nightclubs and restaurants, strip clubs. I'm one guy that can do both. Most nightclub operators, maybe all, when strip club operators know nothing about food.
Sure.
I'm a restaurant guy. I'm a trained chef. I had a few restaurants since. I do consulting for restaurants. I'm working on this book now, and I shot a couple of documentaries. One's airing on Vice now, Dark Side of the 90s, season 3. I shot something for A&E, and there's a documentary in the works with Big Fish MGM. They're doing a 3-part doc on me, and we're trying to get a movie done, a feature done, not just on Scores, but my story, which is kind of interesting. In my book, I talk more about my grandfather and how he worked with the mob during Prohibition, and my dad. And I kind of had Anthony Bourdain's voice in my head when I was writing the book. That kind of Tony wrote about restaurants and working in kitchens. So I wrote about kind of my life and how Scores got turned around.
When do you think the book will be out?
All that kind of stuff.
When do you think it'll be out?
Which?
All the stuff you're working on. Do you have any idea?
There's one documentary out now that I just mentioned. One will be out probably in 6 months. The 3-parter probably 8 months to a year from now. This stuff takes a long time. The book a year from now, they're going to release it. Well, knows how long it'll take to make a movie. I'm trying to get other people involved in it to see who can help me move it along.
When the book comes out, you have to let me know. We can we'll have you on again. We could talk more about it. You have a great story, man. You know, any way I can help you, I'd love to. You know, you got a great story. I'm sure many stories we didn't even talk about. I would love to, you know, just talk to you more about the strip club industry. It's a fascinating world of you know, like just all these women and just how it all works. Craig Carlino, fascinating story. I'll ask you one final question, and then we'll get on out of here. I asked pretty much every guest I have on here. Do you regret anything you did in that life and connected to that life? You kind of mentioned you maybe would have taken the deal with Mikey Scars and those guys, but I guess all good things would have came to an end. Do you regret anything? Do you wish you would have just never? Do you wish you maybe would have went and become a lawyer or something else?
Well, I would have became a lawyer if I thought I could get through law school. I don't think that was happening.
Sure.
It's a good time running those high-end clubs. I got to tell you,
You miss it a lot, huh?
Money, being in the newspaper, the gossip
Yeah.
columns, TV. I did Geraldo a bunch of times with Scores. Just taking a strip club that kind of had the reputation of being a seedy industry and bringing it into the mainstream through mainstream publicity was my objective. And all those pretty girls, you kind of miss them. You know, we all kind of miss them. It was a good time, man. It was a good time, but you know, you got to keep yourself centered as well. It's hard. A lot of guys fall up the deep end with drugs and alcohol and ruining their families and their life. And you know, I was just able to navigate that whole world pretty good.
You did. You did a nice job. I got to ask you one other one. It just kind of popped in my head. Let's say I came to you right now and said, listen, Craig, I've got more money than God. I want to open a strip club in, I don't know, Miami or somewhere. Would you come work? Would you do it again? Would you work for? You would?
Sure. But now to open a club is, you know, you're up in the millions.
It's hard.
You're buying them, you know, these clubs do so much business now.
So you would tell someone not to do it? Is that what I'm gathering from you?
Sorry?
Would you instruct me not to do that?
No. It's a very
still a good business.
It's a business that has like a 50% profit margin.
Yeah.
Because of the cost of goods sold is so low. Guys pay at the door, there's no cost. Guys rent the room for $400 or $500 an hour, an 8x6 room, there's no cost. You know, the girls pay a house fee, there's no cost. Your beverage cost or your liquor cost is like 20%. So it's a very high profit with a lot of income streams. The funny money, 40%, those dollars we sold. So it's a very lucrative business.
Why is the strip club industry seem like it's lost its luster a little bit? Why do you think that is?
I know why that is. Back in the 80s, when we started working the clubs, the only place you could see a topless or a naked woman was either in Playboy or Penthouse or Hustler, or a porno movie, which you had to go to a theater to watch back then. Then videos came out, video cassettes came out, and then CDs came out. But there was really nowhere to see a beautiful naked or topless girl.
Now it's thrown at you.
You know, I say this to people, you could open up your cell phone and see, you know, Kim Kardashian, Paris Hilton having blatant sex right in front of you, graphic sex, or porn on your phone is free.
So it's the
positive shock value of seeing a topless or naked woman has kind of dissolved. Because as soon as a young man turns on, you know, he's 12, 13, gets a cell phone, the first thing he's going to do is look for porn.
Right.
Right. So, you know, now to walk in for a young guy to see a naked woman or a topless woman is no big deal anymore. So that's why the clubs have, well, but there's still some very lucrative clubs that have changed their program, that kind of mix being a regular club with a strip club, kind of hybrids, so to speak. But it's a very lucrative business. And there's still girls that do it. I mean, you never get sick of the girls. Me and my friends own some very big clubs in Miami and stuff. We still go out once a week. We're all 60 years old. Those guys are older than me. And we hang out in strip clubs. We hang out at the bar. We don't get table dances or anything, but we drink and this stuff because we're used to being around all these pretty girls. You certainly don't want to make a fool of yourself. You
I mean,
know,
listen, I can't lie to you, Craig. Like, I live in an area where, like, we would never have a strip club in this town. It's just too conservative. But if there was one, like, I would go to it. Like, there's just not a lot near me. So, like, I never had really a reason to go to one, but I would go and, like, drink there. I mean, it's
yeah.
better than going to a bar and seeing a bunch of men, like, you
Well,
want to see
that's the
women.
thing.
Who
It's
doesn't want that?
kind of the smaller clubs, which there are
Yeah.
a lot of those too in South Florida that are very lucrative. Look, if you have a small club that does $4 or $5 million a year, not 30, 40, 50, you could pull $2 million a year out of it. So it's very
Sure.
lucrative. And, you just go to the club, you hang out at the bar, you get something to eat. The bartenders are cute. The pretty girls, the young girls are walking around. It's good for you to go out. Keep a little lead in your pencil. No
Hey,
one's saying
Craig.
you got to sit there and do table dances. That's for the younger guys. Or go into a room and try to get your rocks off. Just to be in that environment of pretty people. A lot of these strip clubs have turned into like Cheers, where people just go every day. They have regulars, and you just around pretty girls. I mean, there's all different levels of these clubs, and they're all profit percentage wise very lucrative.
Craig, I'm not going to lie to you. In 10 years or less, I'm going to hire you to work at my club. I'm going to open one. And that's
10
my
years
next
we have to
goal.
wait.
And say that again?
We have to wait 10 years?
Probably not, maybe 5. But I got to build some things. I'm getting there. I always wanted a brick and mortar business. I've done everything on the internet my whole life. I want a brick and mortar business. And I kind of feel in a way like you. I want to hire someone like you. You do all my work for me. So maybe this won't be the last time we work together on something.
Sorry, say again?
Maybe this won't be the last time we work together on something.
Be my pleasure, man. Love it.
Sounds good. Well, a great story, Craig. I'm going to put some of your work in the description. Yeah, everybody check Craig out. I'm sure we'll have you on again, Craig. Really fascinating to kind of talk about this stuff and hear about your story. What a life. Thanks for coming on with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, best luck to you, and thanks for having me on. And we'll talk again.
I look forward to it. Thanks so much. And thanks everybody for watching. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you thought of the interview below. We'll see you next week here on The Sit Down.